So I wanted to talk about Hinduism. I think I was very impressed with Hinduism in the past. I think now, because it's one of the only old cultures that gives us very complete picture of what it was, of what the whole thing means, and we can look at the Vedas, and they're some of the oldest texts in that we have in human history. And the Puranas are also old as shit. So, and it's a ton. It's thousands and thousands of pages of information that we have. Whereas, like, you know, Sumerian history, we have a few texts. I mean, I'm not, an expert on archaeology or anything, but it's certainly not nearly as much as with Indian texts or like Beowulf, for example. Beowulf goes and kills a troll and then a dragon. It's it's certainly um, not the full, complete picture of a culture that we get in the Puranas and the Vedas. I guess I wouldn't necessarily call the Vedas a complete picture like that, but it's like I almost want to describe it as like the Greek magical papyri if we had like if we had it, like 100 times as big about old Greek culture. Because there's a lot of things. Apparently, so I haven't read a ton of the Vedas. I've seen there's like little poetic stories sort of put in a poetic sort of style. There's very briefly talking about some of these things I noticed. Apparently, in like Artha Veda, there's like spells. It talks about spells, and there's a ton of like ceremonies that are described, apparently. So that's just a lot of information that we don't get somewhere else. And I think the Puranas are a little bit, to me, more impressive because the stories can kind of build out a whole cosmology and mythology of sort of what Hinduism is and what it's about, what the activities of the gods are, the universe, etc. That being said, I think just because it's the most complete doesn't make it 100% accurate. But I think it causes me to sort of filter any other information through Hinduism because it's so complete. And even if I have unverified personal gnosis, I'm gonna think about Hinduism in that case, because of how complete it is, simply. So I want to say that I really focus on Hinduism and sort of the Hinduistic family of religions and practices because just how much there is. And I mean, if we talk about the whole body of texts, there's instructions for how to build a city. There's instructions for how to set up your house. There's instructions for how to rule as a leader of a nation. That, like, basically the prince, but it's Shukraniti. Basically any sort of literature you could want. There's some version of it in within the under the umbrella of Hinduism, or Hinduism, Buddhism, you know these sort of different religions that share a lot of qualities, belief in reincarnation and things like that. So it's like it's so complete. It's even more complete if we think of it that way. um yeah, the thing is, so according to like Srila Prabhupada, he says in one of the purports in Srimad Bhagavatam that the spiritual world is full of like blue people with like four arms, and I think he even described them as being androgynes. And I think it's interesting because it sounds basically just like what Plato's description of Atlantis. Um, I believe he described people as androgynes there, and so that's a real thinker. And it also sounds just like in the starseed community, a lot of uh, now there's like alien contactees, so people telepathically or astrally communicate with aliens, and they'll communicate with these various different alien collectives. And the thing is that a lot of different ones will kind of bring back the same information, but at the same time, this has been a culmination of like there's a few, and then and more came out, and they sort of build off each other. So there is an element of certain tropes kind of came into popularity, and now it's sort of its own culture. In fact, I might mention the Shaver mysteries, which are interesting to look into. I'll probably do a separate video on those, but yeah. So uh, alien contactees of the blue Syrians, or Magi, will say they'll describe the Magi worlds as being basically exactly the same as the what is it, Goloka, Vrindavana, Vaikuntha worlds, the Vaikuntha worlds. And I think that's interesting, especially since uh, the Magi are, one of the big things is that they have a big hive mind. It doesn't completely control their intelligence, but they just sort of always their their feeling of what they should do at a particular time, or where they should go, or what they should say is they're considering it through filtering through like a shared intelligence with everyone else on the planet, or multiple planets. Um, you know, it sounds very similar, especially when it says that Krishna is one without a second, who expands himself innumerable times, and then it's like kind of implied that there's Krishna, and then there's a bunch of different Vishnus throughout the universe. So there's this idea of one intelligence inhabiting many bodies. I'm not really ready to completely make assertions based on some of these things that I've experienced, or that I've read, because I've also had some interaction with like blue Syrians. But yeah, so I think there's a lot to think about, but I think Hinduism is where I'd like to start, or where I like to start what I like to filter everything through, because it's so complete. But like I said, I have some feeling that maybe it's not entirely accurate, actually. So